Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another London Ballet Circle in Conversation. For those of you who are new to the London Ballet Circle, it's a great pleasure to have you with us. If you live in the Greater London area, you know how incredibly fortunate we are to have so much dance to enjoy. Between the companies based here and those that tour to London, we can attend performances just about every night of the week. Earlier this month, we were treated to a visit from Scottish Ballet, a brilliant company that we don't get to see often enough here in the south of England. Audiences were wowed by their Coppelia. Of course, over half our membership is now outside the Greater London area, so I know many of you have had the opportunity to see this production in the company's home theatre or on tour. And tonight we welcome Scottish Ballet principal Constance Devernay-Laurence. Her reviews, not just for Coppelia, but for everything she dances, are always glowing, and we look forward to hearing about her journey through the world of ballet. Deborah Weiss, who's no stranger to the London Ballet Circle, will lead the conversation. Debs has done several interviews for us in the past, and it's always a pleasure to have her back. So welcome, Constance and Deborah. If you have a question for Constance, she'll be happy to take it. So please type your first name and the question into the chat box, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to those in good time. And now please enjoy this evening's In Conversation with Constance and Deborah.
Hi, Constance. It's absolutely wonderful to have you here. And I'm going to start right at the very beginning, which I believe is in France, where you were born. So tell me a little bit about how you started out.
Sure. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. So I was born in Amiens, in the north of France, and ballet was not in my family at all. I was about 6 years old when I started my first ballet class. It was kind of a bit of a surprise because my family is very into sports and very active. So, we did I played a lot of tennis, and I was horse riding, and then I developed asthma and a lot of allergies. So a lot of the sports I was doing had to go. And so my mum thought, okay, let's try ballet. She needs to keep being active. So I went into a ballet class and I loved it. And it wasn't until my parents took me to see the Nutcracker and Paris Opera that I really, really fell in love with dance. I don't think I spoke for the whole ballet. I think it was the music, the costumes, just the whole atmosphere I thought was incredible. So that's kind of what really hooked me in. And then from then on, we used to do a lot of shows with my school. And not a lot, let's say one a year, 1 or 2 a year. And I think that's when my teacher realized how much I love the stage. I wanted to be on stage all the time. So she thought it would be a good idea to put me into competitions, ballet competitions. So I think I did my first one. I must have been around 9 years old. Didn't really place, didn't really do well at all. But I loved it. I loved being on stage, and I think she realized my love. And she was really the one, my teacher, Marie-Josée Delaunay, she was really the one that gave me that love of dance, that love of ballet. So from then on, I did a bit more competitions and, so different dances. So what was out there, learned. And when I was 12, I won a summer school in Cannes, in l'École supérieure de danse Rosella Hightower. And so we went, my parents took me on the summer school, and they were quite happy, I think, because they had a holiday in the south of France at the same time. And I went to class every day there. And then at the end of the summer school, the end of the week, the teacher I had there just said to me, there's an audition coming tomorrow. If you want to join, it might be a good idea for you to do the audition. So I was like, okay. So I told my mom and dad, can I do this audition? I think it's for the school. They were like, sure. So I did the audition and then got a place. And that was a bit of oh, okay. So we went back up to Amiens in the north, and after a lot of convincing to my mom and dad, I joined the school at the age of 12 and a half. So that's where it kind of really started. So we did academics in the morning, and then dance training in the afternoon. Yeah.
Can I just ask you, you say that your parents needed a bit of persuading. Presumably that's because they're not from the dance world themselves. So what were their concerns, or sort of what were they slightly worried about in terms of you pursuing a career in ballet?
I think it was a lot for them, because I think it was also the distance. I think going to boarding school, and I think that was probably the main thing. I've got a much older brother and older sister. My brother is 11 years older and my sister 9. So they are kind of, gradually moved out. My brother went to engineering school and moved in with his girlfriend. And then a year later, my sister went to law school, so she moved out. And I was 12. So I think they looked at me like, it's okay, we've got time. And then I was like, actually, I think I want to go as well. So I think there was a bit of that, which I didn't realize at the time. It must have been really hard for my mom. But I think there was also, there was a bit of, what kind of career is this? I think what convinced them was the fact that we did academics. I think if that gone, I don't think it would have been an option. So the deal was that I would study very hard, and at the end of my sort of academic year, do my baccalaureate as you would in a normal school. And I remember them checking, at the time there were 3 different baccalaureate, and I remember them checking it was a really good one. And I think that's what pursued them, that I wouldn't miss any on the academics from a different school. Yeah.
So after that, you ended up coming to the UK, to English National Ballet School. Why there, and how did that come about?
Sure. So I did 3 years in Cannes. So I was 12 to the age of 15. And I think my teacher, 2 of my teachers, my contemporary teacher and my ballet teacher, who came from Paris Opera, liked me a lot. And I think they realized, not necessarily that more potential than others, I think I just really wanted it. And I asked, I don't even know if I asked them or if they approached me, I can't remember. But I remember we decided I'll send a videotape for Paris Opera. So I went on the weekends and we filmed a videotape, which it would have been for the sort of like upper school, if you compare it to the Royal Ballet School. So the sort of 16 and above. So we worked on, you had to do a class, so we filmed that. We did a couple of variations, solos, and then we sent it. And then we also worked so I could audition for the Conservatoire in Paris. So Paris Opera came back saying no. So that was a very harsh no. When I remember when we try and find out why, they just said I didn't have the body. So that was that. That was quite that was quite sad, but it didn't stop me, thankfully. And then the Conservatoire, I went.
Sorry. No. That wrong. They got that wrong. We do have the body.
Thank you.
Fair loss.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess it's always joining from not from a young age is probably always tricky, because you've missed so much on their specific training. But yeah, I think I was just small for what they were looking for. And then the Conservatoire, I did class there in Paris, and then same thing, it was a no. So I came back to Cannes quite distraught. I wasn't, I just thought, maybe it's not for me. I think also for my family who were not in dance, they also thought maybe it's not for her, and my teacher said, no. there's more. And she said, you know, why don't you try London? Because they have the similar training. It's very good schools, and I think you should send your staff to Royal Ballet School and English National Ballet School. So actually flew with a friend, stayed at her family's place near Heathrow. And then we went to do the Royal Ballet School upper school audition, and then I think came back, and then I think a weekend later with my parents we got on the Eurostar and we went to Hortensia Road E&B and did a class there. So Royal Ballet School I didn't get in, but E&B I got a call back, so we went again on the Eurostar. And then I did the second day. And then at the end of the day, they offered me a place, and got back on the Eurostar, and that was a bit of a shock. And then again, after a few convincing my parents, I joined E&B school.
Okay, so after that, I gather you had a good experience there, and you ended up joining Scottish Ballet. That was your first company, wasn't it?
Exactly, yeah, first and still current. Yeah, so Ashley Page came to watch class and then offered me a contract.
So presumably then your parents thought, okay, this is all heading in the right direction now, and they must have been very proud. So tell me about your early days in Scottish Ballet, because obviously you've been through the ranks, you didn't sort of start off as a principal. So tell me about those first, couple of years or whatever.
Sure. So I joined, I was 17, so I was quite a baby. I remember my first time in Scotland. I struggled with the Glaswegian accent a lot, but I got used to it. And my first season was Sleeping Beauty. It was Ashley Page's version. So that was amazing. We had a month, and then we went straight into about 50 shows. I think it was a long tour, as it always is with Scottish Ballet Christmas tour. It's their biggest tours, and I loved it because I was on stage every day, sometimes twice a day, and because obviously it's a heavy production for a small company. It meant that I did every single show as a Corps de Ballet member. I was still an apprentice at the time, so when it was 6 of us, it was six we called it extra girls, and we knew there was only one full-time contract. So my first contract was for the whole Sleeping Beauty tour, 3 months, and then I got kept on for another 3 months along with 2 other girls, so we went from 6 down to 3, and then I luckily got that full contract. And what was amazing is Ashley offered me the job, and then we went straight on tour to China, and I remember being like, oh my god, this is amazing, you get to travel, you get to do what you love. So I was I just felt amazing. I felt home. And what was great with the company, and still is with Scottish Ballet, that it was a very versatile repertoire, and that's what I loved from the minute I started.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very true, and that is what is so appealing about a company like that, the diversity and the opportunities it gives even very young dancers.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me when you first did something out of the Corps de Ballet.
Sure. So I think probably the first ever I did was Gretel, in Hansel and Gretel, which Jamil, my husband, played Hansel. and yeah, it was tricky because there was a lot of storytelling. So that's when I realized, it's artistic and story is as important as the technique. So that was quite good for me to do this. And then it quickly grew into something a little bit more challenging, which was Sugar Plum, Nutcracker. And that was amazing. And it was Peter Darrell, so it was quite the traditional one. And I really enjoyed it. And I think it's those two that got me a promotion to soloist. Amongst more contemporary, we did Work Within Work by William Forsythe, and I was one of the lead second cast. So it was kind of different avenue, and I think what was good is that I was making sure my contemporary work was as strong as, you know, my Gretel or Sugar Plum. So I really wanted to be good in all areas of Scottish Ballet. So yeah, those were the two roles that I started with, and then it got on to Rite of Spring, which was the sort of representation. Chris's Rite of Spring is slightly different. This was Faith and Death. So it was, I got a few roles under Ashley, but it was really Chris that gave me those opportunities kind of one season after another. And I think that's where I grew and got promoted from core to soloist.
Okay, so I'm really interested in knowing about some of the roles that you've danced quite recently in very important ballets. So I'd like to start with Beza de la Fée, excuse my French accent, which you had a very big part in that. So tell me a bit about that and what it was like dancing the choreography.
I think Beza is probably one of my favorite roles to date. I love everything that Macmillan does, because there's storytelling and the movement is really challenging. I think technically it's challenging, but every move that he created comes from an emotional or story place, so everything makes sense. And his pas de deux were tricky, and you know, I'm still watching it and I'm like, oh gosh, that was hard. But it was amazing because it was the first time that I got to do a role like this, and I was first cast, so I felt pressured, but I really wanted to do it. So there was a lot of research, and we had Donald come up from Royal Ballet and really taught us, you know, explained to us not just the characters, but also you know, the rehearsal process he had been through with Kenneth. So we had that proper introduction and what it meant and what literally every single step, you know, the arm, why you do an arabesque here, what does this mean? And it's such a powerful role. And until then, I kind of did a little bit more of a soubrette young girl thing. So suddenly had to go all very icy queen. And yeah, it was, I just remember going over lunchtime and in my evening, like trying to really understand and making sense of every step. So I really worked hard to you know, be like, you've chosen me at first cast and I'm not going to disappoint you. So that was amazing. And it was quite challenging because it was the year we did the Macmillan celebration. So most of the UK companies went to the Royal Opera House stage. So that was another amazing day. And also quite a challenge for me because, you know, as I said, I didn't get into the school, and, you know, being on that stage, suddenly I was like, okay, it's okay. And I just thought, I can do it. I can show them I can do that. So it was a good inner challenge, and it sort of drove me inside to push through.
Can I just ask that you said Donald came up? Is that Donald McLeary?
Donald McLeary, yeah. Sorry, yeah.
That must have been extraordinary because he's got such a history working with Macmillan, and he had roles created for him. And he must have been able to give a very special insight into what was expected.
Yeah, he was amazing, and he came for a couple of weeks, which was really, you know, amazing. And just seeing him, and actually I remember the first time he came in, it sort of said, okay, you know, let's see it. And so we kind of staggered through the ballet, and he was in tears, I think, because he had not seen it for such a long time, and I think all the emotion came to him. And so that was quite a powerful moment to see him, you know, and I think it brought a lot of memories. And he was amazing because I think for the men especially, he could just, you know, show it and explain and really give, details, very specific details that in the end make such a difference when you perform the role. No, he was such an inspirational, and so good to have him for that long in the studio as well.
So I want to ask you about another Macmillan piece, Miling, which is done quite recently. Tell me what you danced in that. And also, it's a slightly condensed version, isn't it? It's not the same as the Royal Opera House version. So tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. So yes, so it's a short version, which we called up here the scandal at Smiling. And so I danced the role of Princess Stephanie, so Rudolph's bride, and Mary Vetsera, his mistress. So quite the two contrasts. And yeah, so the short version, if you know the ballet quite well, it was basically everything was the same, and the two things that got cut were the hunting scene and the scene with the opera, and the sort of fireworks at the back. So those were cut, which made it quite, I think, tricky for the Rudolph, because that was their sort of breathing break space. So everything kind of had a really strong flow, and I think, yeah, it meant his story, he's sort of going down into that spiral, was slightly quicker. But it was amazing, and I think it was, again, beautiful to be able to do those two roles, those two contrasts, and play with the story, play with the emotions. And I think Mary's probably will stay, that performance will stay forever with me. And I was lucky to do it with Rio from Royal, came to guest, and obviously has done it before, and so also came with that knowledge.
So that's Ricci Hirano, is that right?
Yeah, Riochi, yeah. And again, similar but not quite to Baiser de la Fée. We had Leanne Benjamin that came up, so she was amazing, because obviously she's done Mary, so she really coached us, and she coached us on the story, and then we had Ed Watson that came as well, so he was another inspiration a few days at Scottish, but they were great at explaining, again, giving us what they've been told from the original, and then down to us, and yeah, getting the style. And I think with Miling, what's different to Le Baiser de la Fée is, as Mary especially, you have to be quite natural, so it's less of the walking with pointed feet, and just be more of a just really natural, but keeping, obviously, everything turned out at pointed, so it was just almost unballetifying the sort of stance and the story and the drama.
So the next thing I want to ask you about is the Snow Queen, which is another great role. So and you've done the lead in that, so
Yes.
tell me a bit about that.
The Snow Queen, I would say it's probably it's a little bit similar to the Fairy's Kiss, sort of Ice Maiden story, but she's it's a role that Chris created on me, which was, again, was amazing to have that creation, and she's a very powerful role. She's not human, so having to take that away from the sort of human world, and the whole story starts because of the bond she has with her sister, so a little bit frozen. It starts with just the fact that her sister, and then sort of this ice palace away from a different planet, if you want, and the sister is a little bit bored, and she's a little bit of a tomboy, and she's called the Summer Princess, and Snow Queen shows a vision of the future to try and keep her happy, and in that vision all you see is the Summer Princess fall in the arms of a boy, and she obviously thinks, this is the boy I'm supposed to be with, and she leaves for planet Earth to go and find that boy. And from then on, the Snow Queen breaks the mirror in rage and anger, and decides to go back after her sister. And then to get her sister back, she put some shard of and sort of, if you want, poison that boy's heart, so it becomes ice and it kind of becomes hers. So it's quite a hard story to play and portray because that's just the prologue. So you've got about like 5 minutes to just explain that quickly. And again, it's what I found with this self characters, it's trying to get the emotion across to the audience early on, so they get a bit of a background story and they try to understand her and understand her actions and not sort of categorize her as a mean bad, Disney bad witch kind of thing. So yeah, what I enjoy the most is diving into that and sort of having a background for her, for Snow Queen, to be relevant and to be liked by the audience.
That's interesting, actually, listening to you talk about that, wanting to be liked by the audience when you're actually playing a character that's quite hard. By hard, I mean sort of cold.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, I guess it's almost trying to find some relevance. Obviously no one's able to freeze with someone's heart, but it's kind of using stories or emotions, things that have happened to you, and try and portray that across to try and give a bit of a reasoning for her decisions and for her actions. I think that's always useful, and I think it grabs the audience into your story, and then they sort of follow you through the ballet rather than just watching actions and not really being a part of it.
No, that's a great way to describe it, actually. It's almost as if you're involving the people watching. So that's wonderful. So right, there's a few other things I'm keen to ask you about. So the Crucible, that's another challenge in a different way. Tell us a bit about that.
Completely. So in the Crucible, I play the role of Abigail, which is the young girl that sort of unravels the whole witchcraft and starts, to point the finger at some of the community and accuse them of being witches, and then from then on, basically sentence them to death. And so in Arthur Miller's play, she's quite young. I think she's about 8 or 9. In the ballet, because of the context, we made her a little bit older, so probably 12, 13, still young. And obviously the ballet starts with the affair she has with John Proctor, and she gets seen by his wife. And so from then on, I think from second number 4 of the ballet, it's quite dramatic. And again, you're trying to portray this young girl, this sort of vulnerability, of trying to why she did this, and we went back into the play and the history of it, and she'd lost her parents from a house fire, and so it's trying to find sort of that emotional place you start in the ballet before the curtain comes up. I thought that was really useful for me. And what was amazing is in the process we had a dramaturge to come in, James Bonas, and look at simply like the way you walk and the way you use your breath, and so not even dancing, just walking on stage, what does that mean, and try it with this. And sort of that was really useful for me. And I think one thing he said then, I was like, oh, it was like, try not to act, just be. If you are angry, just be angry, don't try and act as an angry person. Or if you, for instance, if you play a drunk, don't act drunk. If you're drunk, you're trying to be a person that sure that they're not. So it was kind of that whole concept. So that was really useful to play that role.
I'm interested that you've talked about not acting it, but just being it.
Yeah.
That should apply to almost anything that you do on stage. So it must have been real pearls of wisdom to sort of hear somebody actually articulate that, and that you could transfer that to other roles. Yeah.
100%. And I think that helped me for modeling hugely. For Mary especially, because with Macmillan it's a natural thing, and so it's not playing her, but just being her, and at the same time you have to be you, and sort of finding you and the character and that meeting point, and just being that on stage rather than acting it.
Okay, I wanted to ask you a bit about this version of Coppelia that you've just done, and the choreographers, Jess and Morgs, as they're known, Veronica Temple and Jessica, what's her name?
Right, Jessica Wright.
I just think of them as Jess and Morg.
Yeah.
And the different way that they work. So I know that they use film quite a lot in it. It was a big part for you, obviously, and a very different way of working. So can you tell us a bit about the process and how you saw that unfolding when you were working with them?
Sure. So the process was, as you said, completely different, because it was being created at the same time. I think they were still, as they were starting the creation process with the dancers, they were still forming their ideas and the storyline. And also because there's so much element to it. There was the pre-recording, there was going to be the live camera, there was going to be the actual live dancing. There was so much different aspect to think about. I mean, I don't even know how they saw it in their head. And what was hard, because there was so much of it, they were not always saying or talking to us. So we were all a bit like, what's happening? And we did the pre-recording really early on. The ballet was not made at all. So when we went to pre-recording, our technical department, Scottish Ballet, is amazing. They turned one of our studios into this sort of lab. And so it was like a set. And we had a camera crew come in. It's a company we used before called Forest of Black, which did Secret Theatre. I don't know if some of you have seen it. So it's a Glasgow-based company we've used before, especially during the pandemic. So they came, and again, it wasn't just filming at once, because we had to film with different casts. We had to be aware of if, for instance, I was with Bruno and Simon at the times. We knew Simon was leaving, so we had to make sure there was someone else to come in. So we had to film that a couple of times, film different casts. And then they realized, actually, gosh, if you get injured doing a show and this couple change, we actually can't see his face. So we just had to put like a France from the back, and then that's kind of like how so there was all these things to think about. And then I think we did the filming around May, June, and the shows went until August. And I remember, realizing the makeup I've just done, I'm going to have to do this forever, because it's the pre-recording and you have to look exactly the same, the nail polish, like all these things. We were like, oh my gosh, like this is not her. And the costumes, and they realized as well when they did the recording, actually that costume doesn't work. So then we had to refilm things, and and you have to add the budget on top. So it was a lot, I think. And I think for them, I don't know how they did it. It's fascinating that they had that in their head, that vision. And then when the ballet took shape, we did about 10 days in Theatre Royal in Glasgow, just putting it together, trying out the cameras, how we come in and out. We realized that there's a delay from the camera being live then when it's projecting on the screen. So all the interviews, there's that sort of 1 second delay. So we were like, oh my God. So we had to do everything a little bit earlier to try and catch the words. So it was a huge learning process up until the dress rehearsal, where they still hadn't really got an ending. They were, if you've seen the show, you'll make sense. They were debating on whether France and Svanhilda end up together or not, after the whole episode at the lab. So I think we were meant to finish at 5:30 on that day, and the opening act was at 7:30, and I think we got an ending at like 5:40. And again, it was kind of like, do that to that, and then, you know, we'll see, we'll try and find it. So it was amazing. It was stressful. I'm not gonna lie, it was stressful. It was a lot to take on, and again, because all of us were involved, I didn't see it until we did the autumn tour of it, and actually never seen it from the front. And then, so it was huge when I finally looked at it, and I was like, oh my God, like, it's amazing. But until then, we didn't really know how it was going to go. Yeah, the audience at EIF, Edinburgh International Festival, they loved it, but it was a tricky process.
Well, it must have been very, very strange to actually have one of your fellow dancers on stage with a camera, actually filming your face live, that's somehow huge on the audience to see. That must be really quite nerve-wracking, because it's not as if you can, I mean, it's one thing to do a performance, but to realize that it's all massive for everybody to see, you can't hide at all.
No, absolutely. And I realized very early on that it's like, do not look at the screen, because it's the worst when you see yourself. It was hard. It's hard, like you said, you can't hide. You know, sometimes you walk the back and the audience behind you, and you kind of, you know, if you've got dry lips, or you kind of do little things, or your hair's in your eyes, you can't. And in a way, I think it helped, because it made everything real. Similar to what we're saying, don't act, just be. And I think that helped. But yeah, it was learning to use the camera as part of the movement, almost, especially for Rambo, who was the cameraman. You know, I think his movement created the sort of camera angles, and they were almost a dance and a choreography in itself. So it was involving camera as part of like another dancer, and not to look at the screen ever.
I want to ask you about someone who I'm a great fan of, David Dawson, and how you feel about working with him. He has a very particular style of choreography, and he's, I guess I would describe him as a perfectionist. I don't know, but he seems to get something very special out of the dancers that he works. So tell me your feelings about working with David.
I think perfectionist is the perfect word to describe him, I would say. Absolutely. Working with David, I think I can really say it made me a better artist and a better dancer. I learn about my craft. David had this way of, so we did his Swan Lake in the company, and he casted me in the role of Odette Odile. I was a soloist at the time. I'm second cast, and in my first cast I was doing a lot already. And a bit of a context for this kind of role, I think I told you, Deborah, when I was at school, I remember we had to choose for our assessment Odette variation, the classical, or Odile, and I was like, oh, Odette. And then my teacher was like, no, you are not an Odette, you are not an Odette. And it sort of like shook me. I was like, I want to be Odette. So being cast in that, even though it wasn't classical, I was like, okay, I'm gonna prove myself I can be Odette. So that was kind of the place I came with. And I remember David saying to me, I was young, I was 25. He said to me, you know, if you get on board with me, if you get on the journey, if you get on the train, you won't regret it. And I'm going to make you a star. And I was like, okay. And I got on the train, and with David, you have to show vulnerability. You have to be vulnerable. You have to forget everything you know. and let him take you on that journey, push the boundaries, go to the extremities of the classical lines. It's exhausting. He's a perfectionist, so every second of the rehearsal has to be 110%. Even when he kind of says like, oh, you can, well, let's just mark this. And then he looks at you and he's like, you didn't do this. And it's like, I thought we were marking. So it's, it's intense, but the result is so rewarding. And it's going into that place of unknowing what you know, and trusting him, trusting the process, trusting your partner. His partnering incredible. The way he used point shoes and point work, the way he used point shoes for me would be like, like when you put a glove on, a brief leather glove onto your hand, it's like that, but on your feet. So that, especially for someone like they become part of you, and they're part of your body rather than you wearing them. And what's amazing with his work is there's always costume that don't get in the way, and you can really let go. And it's finding that hard balance of, it takes a lot of rehearsals of knowing you have to go to the extremities to know when it's too far, to then bring it back when it's just right. And there's some shows when that doesn't happen, and there's some shows where it does. And they're amazing. And so I guess he was right, because that's what I got promoted on as a principal. So he did make me a better dancer.
That's incredible. I find it hard to believe that someone actually said you're not an Odette, because if you're on a certain trajectory, then you can become an Odette and an Odile, and I think it's sort of awful to be labelled as not being something when you're still developing. But you've clearly absolutely wrong, and you've been a great success in it. Can I actually ask you, and I know that there is a question coming up about this, but is it going to be done again? Not allowed to say.
I'm not allowed to say. But I think so. It's still in the rep. I certainly hope so. But if you came to Ballet Nights, which was done 2 years ago, I managed to perform. Well, it was David's present to me, because we were meant to do it before the pandemic, and the pandemic hit, and then it didn't happen. And he knew I was distraught, and his present was, he gave me the White Swan pas de deux, and so we performed that at Ballet Nights in London, which my husband organized. So I'm hoping if we don't do the full version, I get to at least do that again on the next Ballet Nights. But I would say I have good hopes that it will.
I hope it does as well, because I think it's a remarkable production, and very different from any other production. So I want to go back a little bit in a more general sense. Every dancer of sort of substance has had some low points as well as the high points. And most dancers have at some stage been injured. So can you recall any times when you've had a serious injury where you've had to find a different way of working?
100%. So I had probably the biggest one, biggest injury I had was when I had to go for surgery on my big toe. So you would think a big toe, but unfortunately it was really important for ballet. But so I still unsure what happened, but I had this floating bone between my big toe and second toe. And what they think is I fractured my second metatarsal, and then a bit of the bone came out, and then it was floating, and it was kind of sore and really sore. And then when I couldn't really bear it anymore, went for a scan, and then that's when they saw it. And when they just said, we have to open up, they realized when they opened up, it was cutting my ligament. So so that was about, it was keyhole surgery. It healed really well. And it was about, I would say, a good month out. And then slowly reintroducing exercises. And I think I remember going home and seeing, and it's weird feeling, because obviously the company still goes on, but you see it from afar, you see your role being replaced, you see yourself being replaced, and then they go on tour, and it's like, and you kind of go like, oh my gosh, which is good, show must go on. But I think it was the first time I noticed that, and I think my whole identity just, I lost my dancer's identity. I wasn't sure how I was going to start again. I couldn't walk, like couldn't even put my foot down for a good week, and I had to get injections in my belly to make sure I didn't get like issues with my blood flow. So it was strange. And I realized at that point I needed to have something else. Because, even if everyone is a daughter or a mother or a sister, or you're always a different identity, but I needed something more. And so I started to study. I did a bachelor in sports science and coaching with the Open University. I did that part-time, so that took me 6 years. I graduated last summer. And it was a great help, because I realized I needed something, even not just injuries, just, you have a bad day at work, or you've had a bad show, and I needed something to just open my book and like sort of spiral into. And that was really useful. And what was even more useful was I really interested in body, and I think dance science is really behind compared to sports science, although it's getting better. So it was interesting for me to learn about that sort of world and psychology as well, because I could just use it into my everyday life, and I love teaching and coaching, so eventually that's what I want to go towards. So it was a great start for me. And then at the same time, I did my level 3 diploma as a yoga instructor. So a bad thing turned into a very, very positive one.
Well, I mean, that in a sense, you're setting yourself up for your future as well. And this will prolong your dance experience in every way. So it is a very positive thing. Although I know that being injured is incredibly disheartening.
It's tough. It's tough because you feel like you're losing a part of your day. If it's a long injury, you also get maybe a financial issue. So it becomes really tricky. And when it's a terrible injury, which has happened, I've seen it in friends, you have to question the fact that are you ever going to be able to dance again? So it's tricky. I think the younger you are, the better. I would say, because the sooner you learn how to deal with that, it makes you a stronger artist. But they're horrible, and unfortunately, they're it's part of our career.
Yes, it certainly is. I also wanted to ask you about this Ballet Grand Prix.
Yeah.
That have you set it up in Scotland?
Yes.
About that. That's really interesting project.
So Ballet Grand Prix was created by Cindy Monsoon, and I judged it 4 years ago. Then the pandemic hit and it didn't really happen, and then Cindy came forward to me and said, would you like to run it and direct it? And I was like, yes, please. But I just said, I'm going to need your help because this is very new. But as you heard, my background in competition when I was much younger is kind of what got me to where I am today. So I was really keen to be able to offer that to young dancers in training. So the competition happened on the 25th and 26th of February. So we were based in Dundee, in a place called the Space Theatre. And it ran differently this year. I wanted it to be a celebration of dance rather than competition where, you know, you feel judged. And I really wanted dancers to just have time to be on stage and demonstrate and perform a classical solo and a contemporary solo. But I also wanted them to have fun during the day. So they took part in a masterclass that was taught by a professional in dance. And they also, on the same day, learn a défilé, so a group dance, all together, and then perform that before the award ceremony. So it was very tiring for them, but it was a real full day and a celebration of dance. And then, you know, we had great supporters and sponsors. And I just want, you know, if I could one day say I've helped this dancer go into this summer school, which then made them get a job at blah, blah, blah. You know, I would love to be able to say that one day. So yeah, that's why I took the job.
And is that likely to happen again?
Yes, for sure. I'm looking at dates for next year. And I don't just want it to be a yearly competition event. So I'm looking to put some masterclasses on for young dancers, especially in Scotland, because there's not that many. Especially if you're not part of the associates program with Scottish Ballet, it can get there's not that much opportunity. But also I realized a lot of the dancers I came up with from England. So, you know, I want to close the bridge and maybe one day have, you know, regionals and hopefully a national somewhere.
So what have you got coming up? I mean, I know what you've got coming up, but do tell us.
So coming up, we're actually rehearsing for a streetcar named Desire, which we performed probably 6-7 years ago when it was first created at Scottish Ballet. A few different companies have done it. Estonian National Ballet did it with Eve and Joffrey, I think. So it was choreographed by Annabelle Lopez Ochoa. So we're bringing that back. We're doing a Scottish tour of it and what we call a small scale. So we're going to take it to the Highlands and Islands, north of Scotland. Between the national tour with the Scottish tour and then the Highlands and Islands, we're taking the Crucible to America for a 3 weeks tour, which is very exciting because we haven't been there for ages. And we're going to Nashville, Tennessee. We will perform it at the Kennedy Center in Washington and in Charleston as part of the Spoleto Festival. So great venues. Then after that, it's summer. And yeah, we get 4 weeks off. So looking forward to that as well.
And on a personal note, you have actually recently got married, haven't you?
Yes, I have. Jamil and I got married in August last year, so 6 months ago now already. We got married in the south of France. Jamil and I met in Scottish Ballet. Yeah, we've been together 11 years. So yeah, it was wonderful.
And how do you feel about working together with him? I mean, is it a positive, or is it better that you have your separate lives in a sense?
Yeah, no, it's always been positive. Jamil, so when we were in the company together, funny enough, we got partnered a lot together. Then we actually got together in life, and then we got less partnered together. But it was amazing because it was, you know, obviously we were a relationship, but it became also a sort of helping, coaching, and we were growing into the company and growing as artists together. And you know, anytime I wasn't sure, I had a bad show, I'd be like, can you have a look at this? And so it was really amazing to be able to do that. Then the pandemic hit, and I think everyone was like, oh my God, stuck together with my partner. And we were like, that's every day for us. Actually, we saw less of us during each other during the pandemic than we would have working together and touring. But touring together was amazing. Didn't realize how amazing it was until Jamil left Scottish Ballet to become a freelancer and create his own production company down at Lantons in London, create ballet nights and create more films and direct. So that's when I really realized how lucky we were to tour and travel these amazing places and perform together. But it's brilliant because it's an industry that we get to learn together, and I think we different, and I think we can help each other become better in our own areas, but also create something together. So it's amazing. We're lucky.
So I thought perhaps I might move to some of the questions that people are sending in, because it's quite relevant to what we've already discussed. So one of the questions from Susan will be, will there be another ballet nights?
Yes, there will be another ballet nights. Not too sure exactly when, but I would say, I don't want to say too much, probably in the autumn this year. So there will be a different one, and hopefully it can run on a more yearly basis. So yeah, it's being drafted as we speak.
And is it just a couple of nights, or and that's it? So it's more like a gala, really.
It was at the time, but hopefully I think Jamil is trying to make it a 4-night program with guests from all over the world, choreographers that are established, choreographers that are sort of the classics that we'll see on its own, and more emerging and new voices and all styles as well. So amazing, really amazing platform. It's probably will be at the Lantern Theatre in London as well, which is a great space, and quite a close proximity with the audience. So I think as an audience member, you get to see something different, more of almost like a studio feel when you get into the studio and watch a rehearsal, but as a show. So it's yeah, I think it is interesting, and I think it's amazing for dancers and for choreographers to showcase their work.
It must also be rather nerve-wracking if you're a performer and you've got the audience very close by. You must feel as if you can't get out of breath.
Yeah, it's a different feeling. I actually really enjoy it because I think they almost see a quite of a raw concept, and they hear the breathing and they see the sweat, and sometimes probably might get a bit of sweat as well, but I think it's definitely interesting. You get to see a lot more than you would on stage, and it's almost like you see the work more than you would from that sort of distance.
So another question has come up. Susan also asks, when you came back from injury, having seen others dancing your roles, did you feel you had to prove yourself again, as if you had to show that you were as good as you were before the injury, if not better? And what does that do to your confidence?
I think on a personal level, I think I felt that I had to prove myself. I don't think the company saw it that way. I think at Scottish, they've always been really good at giving you the space, and we've got a good medical team now. But yeah, I think on a personal level, it's tricky because most of us will rush back in, and you have the issue of hurting it again, or not, making it last and drag longer, because we always keen to come back. So it's learning to be patient with yourself. There was definitely good days and bad days where you sort of do that bit of a progression, and then for some reason you have a few bad days where everything hurts, and then then it gets better. So it mentally, psychologically, it's hard. It's helpful when there's that support. I would say it's very difficult when the company, I mean, with Scottish Ballet, because we're such a touring company, when the touring company is away and you're the one back at base, that's tricky. Because you feel like you're swimming against current and you're trying to get back and you see everyone doing their thing and you're like, oh, I feel really behind. So that I think in a confidence setting, it's tough, but you have to, and I didn't know this at the time, but you have to trust yourself, trust the medical team, but mainly you have to listen to your body, and you have to know that you've been training for this for, you know, years, and it's in us, and so it will come, but it's being patient and knowing that if it's not there, it's okay, just take that time. But I would say I definitely became stronger after all of my injuries. And I would say every time I see a dancer go off, they come back stronger. They come back mentally stronger, physically stronger. And that sort of look out of the situation, I think, is very good, because you get time to think. You also get time to review performances, roles that usually when you go from one season to another, you don't have that headspace, but when you suddenly go out of a situation, you can. And I think everyone comes back from it more mature than they did before.
I guess there must also be that situation where you actually get to watch other people doing your roles, and you might think, oh, yeah, that's quite interesting, actually. And when you come back to it, you might want to change the way you have thought about it before. So it's kind of reassessment.
100%. And I think as dancers, we do and do and do and do, and we forget to just watch and observe. And yeah, you learn so much from other people. And it's sort of that very fine line, tricky line of watching and not comparing, because as dancers, you know, first of all, you've got that mirror and it's tricky, but also you know, there's casting, there's auditions, there's roles, so you are being compared on an everyday basis. But it's the minute I learned to watch others and not compare and try and do what they do, but learn why this might be interesting and why this work, and then find my way and meet that. That's when I really grew, and grew as an artist and a dancer. It's tricky. It's comparing in that sort of good environment and supportive, and adding what you can do with, you know, sort of taking the best out of others and then combining it with your strength, and then, you know, opening that flower. So it is difficult. Not comparing is tough.
I've got another question, actually. If you could pick someone that you haven't yet worked with, but who you've always wanted to work, who would that be? Whether it's somebody coaching you, or a choreographer. I mean, if you had the opportunity for someone to create a role for you, would you have anybody in mind?
They're really difficult questions. I would like to work with Wayne McGregor. I would like to experience, you know, his creation and the way he works. And yeah, I think he is able to take classical shapes and classical technique, and again push it to a boundary and create new shapes, but we're still with that classical form. And another amazing choreographer with partnering, and a great storyteller. So yeah, I think I would say it's probably the one person I would want to work with. But yeah, again, it's hard to pick, because I think being able to work with so many different styles and choreographers, but also coach and repetitor and all the dancers, I think that's what creates us as artists, and sort of open our vocabulary and style. So I would probably want to work with everybody. But yeah, I think Wayne, probably currently Wayne, yeah.
And if there was one role, I'm being really awkward here, okay?
Okay.
If there was one role in the entire repertoire, classical or contemporary or whatever, that you haven't yet danced, because you've obviously danced quite a lot now, is there something you feel it would be terrible to retire and not having had the chance to perform this particular role?
Juliet. Yeah, I think it's the one role that I don't want to retire until I've done it. I'll take any versions. No, yeah, Juliet, I think it's the one role I would love to do. And very close to Juliet would be Manon. Yeah, Kenneth, yeah. Both amazing dramatic roles.
Yeah, funnily enough, that doesn't surprise me at all. And I'm first or the last to want to do those roles, but hopefully they will come along in the next couple of years. You never know. One of our listeners has said it was lovely to Rosie says it was lovely to listen to Constance, but I have to go now. Love her French Scottish accent, a beautiful combination. So,
thank you.
Unless anybody has got any other questions that they want to put forward, I think I might hand back to Susan and say a huge thank you to Constance, and I can't wait to see you dance again.
Thank you so much, Deborah.
Okay, I'm just reading another message. Oh. Yes, it's not a question, but just I'm not quite sure who that is. Susan, can you help me? Oh, it's Fiona.
Fiona.
Yes, she said that she loved the first ballet nights because it was so intimate and close, and your White Swan pas de deux was a highlight. I guess the challenge of the venue will be how to increase the audience size. One of the positives of this event for me was Jamil's introduction to each piece, explaining what it was and why it was included, and something about each performer and choreographer. No other gala does this. Please continue. I'd like to encourage audience members to make the effort to get the tube to Canary Wharf. It's a short walk. And Jane wants to know which Romeo and Juliet, and question marks Christophe Pasters. You must have worked with Christophe.
So I have not worked with him personally, because I joined a year after he created Romeo and Juliet for Scottish Ballet. So I didn't work with him directly, but I worked on the production, not as Juliet though. And I remember I was cast in it, but never got to do it. I mean, yes, to be fair, any production of Romeo and Juliet, I would like to, any of them. But I think, obviously, as you've heard me talk, Kenneth Macmillan would be, amazing. But David Dawson has done one, he's created one, and I would love to see that, because I think his freedom of movement would add so much to their love and Juliet, and also the dramatic ending. So he's probably, along with Kenneth, probably one that I would want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got a suggestion from Jane here that it should be Macmillan, but yeah, whatever. Okay, Susan, I am going to hand back to you now.
Thank you. Thank you, Deborah and Constance. That was absolutely fascinating. Constance, it's always interesting to have the opportunity to get to know the person behind the dancer. We see you on stage, we believe you're the Snow Queen, we believe you're, Manon or Coppelia, or Swanhilda rather, but then we meet you and you're such a bubbly, bright, delightful person, and it's wonderful, and it gives us so much of an appreciation. And now when we see you on stage again, the experience will be enhanced immensely, and that's one of the wonderful things about the people in the ballet world, how they're so willing to talk to us and let us get to know them. And we thank you so much for that. And certainly when Ballet Nights comes back, I think you probably have quite a few London Ballet Circle members who will be first in line to buy tickets, and absolutely looking forward to it very much. So thank you for sharing your story with us. It's just wonderful. And Deborah, thank you. You asked great questions, and it was such a nice, comfortable conversation. And as always, thank you.
Can I just say that Constance is such a delight to interview.
Thank you.
Really lovely. And I'm very jealous that your English is so superb. You just, it's unbelievable. It really is. You're completely fluent, and that is just extraordinary. So you're completely delightful. Thank you for that.
No, thank you so much. Thank you for having me on this platform. It's amazing. It's always good when you get to talk about your craft and speak to your audience up close, because sometimes you forget there's that connection is real.
Well, we appreciate it immensely. Thank you. And there are many young Constances out there pursuing their dream to become professional ballet dancers. And we at the LBC, we're proud that as a charity, we're able to support those young dancers through their schools. So if you would like to make a donation, we would be absolutely delighted. It will go to a very good cause. Please just visit the website, www.tlbc.org.uk, and click on the donate button.